Review of percentages. Our learning intentions are understand what percentages are, write a percentage as a fraction or mixed number, change a percentage to a decimal, change a decimal to a percentage. And our success criteria is explain the meaning of percentages, convert a percentage to a fraction or a mixed number, convert a percentage to a decimal, convert a decimal to a percentage. So what is a percentage? A percentage is a convenient way to write fractions that have a denominator of 100. Percent, written with the percentage sign, means per 100 or for every 100. So for example, 12% equals 12 over 100. Writing a percentage as a fraction. To write a percentage as a fraction or mixed number, first write it as a fraction with a denominator of 100, then simplify. So for example, if we have 53%, we will write this as a fraction of 53 over 100. And we can't simplify that any further, so that is our fraction. Another example is 161%. If we write that as a fraction with a denominator of 100, we have 161 over 100. This is an improper fraction, so we can change it to a mixed number by dividing 100 into 161, and we get 1 with 61 over 100. And our final example is 35%. So again, we will write this as a fraction with a denominator of 100, which will be 35 over 100, and we can simplify this to 7 over 20 by dividing the top and the bottom by 5. Changing a fraction to a percentage. To change a fraction to a percentage, first change the denominator of the fraction to 100. Let's have a look at some examples. So we have 9 over 100. It already has a denominator of 100, so we can say that that is 9%. Because remember that a percentage means per 100, and here we have 9 per 100. Another example is 7 over 10. Now we will need to change the denominator to 100. So to change 10 to 100, we're going to multiply it by 10. And whatever we do to the denominator, we also have to do to the numerator. So we will have 7 times 10 over 10 times 10. And that will give us a fraction with a denominator of 100, which will be 70 over 100, and that will equal 70%. Here's another example, 1 and 1/5. So this is a mixed number. First, we will have to convert it to an improper fraction, which will be 6 over 5. Now we need to change our denominator to 100, and 5 times 20 is 100. Whatever we do to the denominator, we also have to do to the numerator. So we will have 6 times 20 over 5 times 20, which will equal 120 over 100, which is 120%. Changing a percentage to a decimal. To change a percentage to a decimal, we can write it first as hundredths and then as a decimal. Let's have a look at some examples. 52%. So first we will write this as hundredths, which will be 52 over 100, and then from there we can write it as a decimal, as 0.52. This should be familiar to you from when we were working with decimals. Another example is 4%. So we will write that as hundredths, which will be 4 over 100, which will equal 0.04%. 0.04 as a decimal. And our final example is 215%. Once again, we will write that as hundredths, which will be 215 over 100, which will equal 2.15. Changing a decimal to a percentage. To change a decimal to a percentage, we can first write it as a fraction and then change to a decimal, or we can multiply the decimal by 100. Let's have a look at some examples. Our first example is the decimal 0.39. Now we want to change that to a percentage. So first we will write it as a fraction, which is 39 over 100, which equals 39%. Let's have a look at another example. Our decimal is 0.08. Now with this one, we're going to multiply it by 100, which was the other way you can change a decimal to a percentage. So we have 0.08 times 100, and when you were working with your decimals earlier, you would have seen that when we're multiplying by 100, you can move the decimal places to the right 2 places. So if we move the decimal to the right 2 decimal places, we end up with 8%. And our final example is 3.5. Once again, we can multiply that by 100. So if we have 3.50, we multiply it by 100. So we move the decimal point 2 decimal places to the right, and we have 350%. Now it's your turn to practice by doing some textbook exercises. Today we're working on textbook exercise 1101 on page 334 and 335. There are a few questions there and you may not get them all done, and that's okay. Just make sure you have understood this presentation and you understand how to convert between fractions, decimals and percentages. As always, if you need any help, please get in contact with your teacher.